Coming up on this episode of Nintendo Cartridge Society, we make like Mike Jones and tumble through time! It's dangerous to go alone, so the Nintendo Cartridge Society goes with you. Welcome to Nintendo Cartridge Society. My name is Patrick Ellers, and I am joined, as I am always joined, by my co-host, Mark Mitchell. Mark, how's it going?
It's going great. Can I tell you, I am very excited for the opening of Super Nintendo World at Universal Studios Hollywood.
Which is happening tomorrow.
Yeah, that's right.
We won't be there for it.
No, that's also right.
Right. But we can still be excited for something even when we're not there.
Exactly, because we're going to be there just a few days later.
That's right.
We're going to be there on Sunday, February 26th. Patrick and I are going to be hanging out at Universal Studios all day long. We intend to be at Super Nintendo World as much as possible until that big chunky toad, drags us away.
That's right. I mean, also until there's, a showing of the Waterworld Stunt Show Spectacular.
I mean, of
course.
We're
absolutely going to that.
I mean, it's the highest-rated attraction at Universal Studios Hollywood.
It's the best. It's so good. The last two times I went to Universal, Mark, I didn't get into the Waterworld Stunt Show Spectacular.
I'm so sorry.
It's a crime.
A wasted trip?
Yeah. I mean, kind of, yeah.
When is the last time that you... okay, now, a lot of people are probably listening to this, and I'm only half kidding about liking the Waterworld Stunts Spectacular.
You're half kidding about it? It's really good.
But it is so popular that when they built Universal Studios Beijing, they built a whole Waterworld land. A movie
Amazing.
that,
famously bombed.
Famously bombed. Has not been relevant forever.
Right.
And yet the show is beloved.
Yeah. What's your question?
I guess really I don't have one.
Right.
Just that we're going to be at Universal Studios Hollywood Sunday, February 26th. We're going to be spending as much time as possible at Super Nintendo World in between showings of Waterworld the Stunt Spectacular.
I mean, they drive around on jet skis.
What do they call it?
I don't know what they call it. They drive around on jet skis. There are explosions. There are water cannons that shoot into the audience.
A plane lands at the end.
A plane lands on the water.
Incredible. Yeah.
It's a great show. Mark, speaking of great shows, the show you're listening to right now is a great show. You can support it by going to patreon.com.
Wait. Sorry.
Yes.
I mean, you're 100% right.
Uh-huh.
But the reason I was bringing this up, going to Super Nintendo World at Universal Studios Hollywood on Sunday, February 26th, was not to brag. It was to say, we're going to be there, and if you are, we're not doing because it's such short notice, we're not doing a formal meetup. But if you happen to be there on the 26th, let us know. Hit us up on Discord, send us a message, send us an email. Because we would love to meet up with listeners and hang out and go ride Bowser's Challenge together. Or
go check out the Waterworld Stunt Show together. That's fine too.
Yeah, possibly better.
Look, Mark, there were 17 games for the Virtual Boy. One of them was Waterworld. It's related, okay? It is on game for us to talk about Waterworld. We're going to do an episode talking about Waterworld?
Super Nintendo World is going to be a lot of fun. But if we could get a group of us and listeners together to go watch the Waterworld Splash Stuntacular, that would be
making up words.
That would be very fun as well. So anyways, February 26th. Hope to see you there.
We have a Patreon now, patreon.com/Nintendo Cartridge Society, where, we're putting out some fun bonus content that if you would like to support us at the $8 or $16 levels, you can check it out. We're currently in the middle of a miniseries we're doing about detective shows. We're calling it NCS Detective Club. So far, we have watched a couple episodes of Murder, She Wrote. We watched some episodes of Monk, and we talk about those episodes. We talk about those shows and their greater place in the television canon, the weird way that the politics of one show's theme song don't match the politics of the show itself. They're really fun. I'm really proud of those episodes. So if that is of interest to you, go check them out.
Thank you to our new patrons, Jimmy, Mora Bros, Juleascu, and Eddie Martin. Thank you guys so much.
Thank you, everybody, and thank you to everyone who has already become a patron. Also, you should get in our Discord. We have a great time in there. We're talking about Nintendo games basically all the time. You can see how your fellow Nintendo fans are reacting to new game libraries and how many of them they've played all the way through already. Paul's a monster. He's played through so many Game Boy games. It's impressive. It's an invite-only thing, so if you would like an invitation, please email us, nintendocartridgesociety@gmail.com. All right, Mark, let's get into our topic. Let us discuss our favorite games from 5, 10, 20, and 30 years ago. Now, Mark, this is, first of all, this was going to be our topic last week, and then Nintendo disrupted everything by putting out like the best Direct we've ever seen. But we've done this exact topic a couple years ago, but because years have passed since then, and because it wasn't exactly 5 years ago that we did it, everything here is fresh.
Yeah, that's right. I think we did it before in 2019. Yeah, so it's been a while.
It has been a little while, but I think. I mean, part of the reason why we wanted to do it before the Direct was announced was that there was all this like anticipation about like, is Nintendo going to do a Direct? What's the future of Nintendo? And we were like, no. The future's great, but the future's going to come no matter what, right? The past is something we can explore forever, right? And I think the Nintendo Direct was also like, yeah, the future's great. We'll get there. Here's Tears of the Kingdom. It's still coming out. But all this other stuff, it's from the past. Prime Remaster, the Game Boy and Game Boy Advance libraries, Etrian Odyssey. Like all these things coming back from the past. So like, I don't know, it feels to me like Nintendo is in a celebrate its own past mood. So why don't we do the same?
Yeah, and this was fun to look back, 5, 10, 20, 30 years ago.
Yeah.
And kind of see like the context of the time, the games that were released then, because looking back through the different years, it was kind of I don't know, I had a lot of fun just like going back and revisiting and being like, oh yeah, what did come out in 2003?
Yeah, so like the goal here is for us to determine like what our favorite game of that year was, but I think we're also we can't help but like give a bunch of context as to both like what Nintendo was putting out at that time, what the hardware was, and where we were in our like game playing. I'm barreling towards the word career, but I hate that.
No, let's embrace it.
Our game playing careers. Okay, great. So, I mean, we got to start off with the first year, 5 years ago. We're at 2018.
This show existed,
which first of all blows my mind. It also blows my mind that like 5 years ago, this is just how time works, was 2 years into the Switch's life cycle. We aren't even into the Switch's launch year anymore.
No, yeah, that's right. We were past the incredible year that was 2017.
Right.
2018, nothing to sniff at, but
sort of a slump year for the Switch, I think.
I was surprised looking back at like the list of games that were released where there was stuff. But it wasn't. I mean,
there's stuff and it ends in Super Smash Brothers. So like,
exactly.
Can't discount the library entirely.
And the 3DS still existed, but it really was kind of like running on fumes.
Yes.
By 2018, and then we were getting some mobile titles like Dragalia Lost.
Oh yeah,
released in 2018.
I mean, I do think it's interesting that like, for me, it's like 2019 where the Switch really like kicks in again as like an exciting, because we get Luigi's Mansion 3, we get the Link's Awakening remake, we get Pokemon, we get what's the big one that I'm skipping over right now? Oh, Fire Emblem, Three Houses. But all that's 2019. We're not there yet. We're in 2018. Mark, by my math, I think there are 4 big-ish Switch releases, and I think they're Mario Rabbids, Labo, Tropical Freeze, and Super Smash Brothers.
So I think that Mario Rabbids came out in 2017 in the US, but came out in 2018 in Japan.
Thank you.
So it's like,
I get tricked by that.
Yeah. So I think it came out in January in Japan, but was a 2017 release in the US and Europe.
I've deleted it from my notes. It is not my pick anyway of what my game of that year.
But sorry, what were the ones that you listed?
Labo, Donkey Kong Country Tropical Freeze with Funky Mode, and Super Smash Brothers Ultimate.
Yeah. So
which comes out at the end of the year.
Which comes in December. I have a couple of other games on here that I think you're right that I think you're right that 2018 was a little bit of a slump year in hindsight. But when we were in it, like Labo was crazy.
Sure.
And we got 3 Labo kits in 2018.
I have 2 of them in my house right now.
And we had a lot of fun putting them together.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think there was a lot of exciting
Did VR
things.
come out the next year?
No, I think it was also in 2018,
okay.
like at the end of 2018. But I could be wrong.
Because there were 4 Labo sets total, right?
So maybe it was 2019, because maybe the first 3 was
there's the variety, the big robot, and then the vehicle
and then the third one was the vehicle kit.
Yeah,
so you're right. So
yeah.
VR must have come out in 2019. But some other notable games in 2018, Kirby Star Allies was released in March. And on the Mario Tennis Aces came out in June.
Great point.
There were a couple of indie games that caught my eye on here. So Yoku's Island Express, which I did not love, but it came out. Thimbleweed Park, which released on Switch which is like a point and click adventure game, and then Overcooked and Overcooked 2, I think were 2018. And so plus there was Xenoblade Chronicles 2, Torn of the Golden Country, Mega Man 11 was 2018. Do you remember Starlink Battle for Atlas?
Yeah, I remember Starlink. What's interesting is this is between Starlink and Labo, it accounts for a lot of the just gray storage boxes that are above my refrigerator. It's just full of that stuff.
Yeah, Starlink, if you don't remember, was an Ubisoft cross-platform game that it was at the very end, Disney Infinity was about to shut down, or maybe they hadn't,
I feel like they already had.
Maybe they had announced it or something.
Because there's no Disney Infinity on Switch.
Right. So so Toys to Life trend was coming to an end, but Ubisoft released this new IP called Starlink, where Battle for Atlas, that was like a space shooter that you could buy the toys and connect them to something.
The toys, at least on Switch, they had a controller or it was like a little dock that you put your Joy-Con connected the Joy-Con to, and then the ships were plugged into the top of it. And of course, and this was a multi-platform game, but on Switch, it included Star Fox and the Star Fox characters. So the box version came with a little R-Wing and a little Fox action figure that slides into it. And I have that, and I have those, and it's very cool. But it's also not the right way to play not the right way to play the game.
But I feel like that was the Switch version had to have been the best-selling one because it had the Star Fox characters,
totally.
And, Star Fox content.
Totally.
The other Switch game that I wanted to point out that came out in 2018, which I really loved, was Pokemon Let's Go Pikachu and Pokemon Let's Go Eevee, and I picked up the Eevee version, and I played all the way through to the end game, and really, really loved this game. I loved the simplified catching mechanics that they borrowed from Go. It sold well. I don't know really what the reputation of it is. I'm kind of surprised that we've never seen another Let's Go, but it was for me, and we've talked about before, I'm a very casual Pokemon fan. This was the ideal Pokemon experience for me.
Yeah. Is that your pick for this year?
No.
I also have a pick that we haven't talked about yet.
Okay.
My pick is a 3DS game.
Oh. So
my pick for 2018, because we're ready to move on to that now, right? To what our actual picks were. WarioWare Gold. It is the sort of culmination of classic WarioWare, pulling in it is basically WarioWare Ultimate, right? It is all the mini games from every version of WarioWare before this, and I talk a lot on the show about how so many Nintendo games and other games that were released in the early 2000s are just going to be lost behind this 2-screen technology, behind the touch and tilt and all these other different modes of get input on these systems. And WarioWare Gold takes all of those concepts from previous WarioWare games, and it's like you can do them in this one. And it's so much like the bookend to all the WarioWare games that came before that. Like the next one that came out on Switch is like a totally different kind of game where you're controlling little dudes in the space. So WarioWare Gold, I maintain that it is like the perfect plain game. And I love it to pieces. It's full of content, full of it.
That's a really good pick. That is a very, like you said, a great way to honor like the WarioWare games and give them a send off, because who knows the next time that we'll be able to, play a WarioWare game that way where you're like tilting it and
and like it has like the microphone so you can blow on it or whatever. But also I said it's preserving those things, but it's only available to purchase on the 3DS eShop for another month. So who knows how well any of these things are.
Well, it's at least
a physical game too.
It's at least keeping it going for a little bit longer.
It's like a little bit longer.
Yeah, tiny bit. So my pick, you did mention it in your list of games, and it was not originally a Switch game, but I played it all the way through on Switch.
Yeah.
And Donkey Kong Country Tropical Freeze is my pick for 2018. I really love that game. I don't think I would have loved the Wii U version. Like, the Switch version is easier. You have more hearts. You can play as Funky Kong. It's just more forgiving, and I'm really glad I got to experience Donkey Kong Country Tropical Freeze that way. We did an episode on this show way back. I think you and I played a lot of it together on the Wii U before it was released on Switch.
Yeah.
And one of the things we talked about a lot is the music in this game. And it is really incredible. The first level, or the first world of Donkey Kong Country Tropical Freeze is not the best representation of what the game will become.
Because it starts basic, right? And the game goes through so many different like cool world areas, not like the movie Cool World, but there are cool areas that are worlds. Like the second one is like an alpine sort of theme. There's like a juice factory in there somewhere. They get weird. It's not your standard like forest, desert, water, mountain. But this one does start in the jungle, and you're like, I've seen jungle before.
Exactly. And just like the way that the music works with the levels, and it becomes more of like a theme park ride in the way that the music interacts with the world, and it's just really incredible. I love Donkey Kong Tropical Freeze, and I would love if someday we get another platformer in that vein.
Yeah, that would be. Why haven't we? Why haven't we gotten a new Donkey Kong Country game?
I don't know. I mean, I don't know.
I guess we went a really long time between 3 and Returns, but still, like,
it just feels weird that like it feels like Returns game should have been a trilogy as well,
right? But just the two. Yeah. I like picking as your 2018 game a Wii U port, because it just sort of like speaks to where the Switch was, where they're like, oh my god, we need to put like a bunch of games out.
Yeah,
no one played the Wii
U. Not on our list for 2018. I think Captain Toad Treasure Tracker made it to Switch that year. Hyrule Warriors, like there was a definitive edition or something that was released on Switch in 2018. So there was a lot of, like the beginnings of these Wii U ports making it to Switch in 2018.
Okay, Mark, are we ready to move on now to 10 years ago? To 2013.
Yes.
Okay. So see if we can even put ourselves in this time. 10 years ago, the Wii U had just come out the November before. So it is new, right? Wii U is new. It is not making a big splash. I don't own one. Mark will never own one.
I will never own a Wii U.
So like even like this first like full year of the Wii U after its release in November, kind of a mixed bag, right? I don't end up picking up my Wii U until 2014, and I get it for Mario Kart 8, right? And like by 18, I feel like, or sorry, by 14, that's when the Wii U is like really cooking, right? If we were somehow to like create a year that is November 13 to November 14, you'd have Super Mario 3D World, Super Mario Kart 8, Super Smash Brothers for Wii U, Tropical Freeze the first time it came out, Hyrule Warriors the first time it came out, the GBA on the Virtual Console. Like, that's a killer year. If the Switch had a year like that, we'd be like, this is a killer year for the Switch. But that is not the year that we're talking about.
Yeah, calendar year, not as strong. It's funny, like, my list for the other years of notable games is pretty long. My list for notable games of 2013, between the 3DS and the Wii U, is like 8 entries long. I will say
some great games on the 3DS this
and
year.
It's not, but yeah, some great games on the 3DS. And just so we don't forget, 2013 was the year of Luigi.
Yeah,
so
that's right.
It had that going for it, and we got new Super Luigi U in August of 2013.
Sure,
but what so some of the games I have on my list is like notable games. A lot of them I have not played. So Fire Emblem Awakening for the 3DS was released in February. Luigi's Mansion Dark Moon was released in March of that year.
A fine Luigi's Mansion game.
And also, you know, we live in a world where Luigi's Mansion 3 sold like over 10 million copies.
Right.
But
why hasn't this game also been ported to Switch?
But when Luigi's Mansion Dark Moon was announced, it was such a like surprise. It was like when Metroid Dread was announced, because it was
That's true.
It was like a franchise that, you know, Luigi's Mansion was a launch game for the GameCube.
Right.
Was kind of like tepidly received because people were used to there being a brand new Mario game.
Right.
And Luigi's Mansion was so different. And so
yeah, that's fascinating, because Luigi's Mansion comes out in 2001, right? Which means that this is 12 years later, the sequel to it coming out. So that's like, and it was a launch game that like sort of served its purpose, but also like kind of felt like a relic of like, oh, you know, that's a launch game. Like, I feel like the analog would be if in 2029 Nintendo puts out ARMS 2.
And it's developed not by Nintendo, but by like a second party. Like Luigi's Mansion Dark Moon was developed by Next Level Games, which would eventually be acquired by Nintendo.
Right.
But at this point was acting almost like a second party.
Also on the 3DS that year, The Legend of Zelda: Link Between Worlds. A great entry in the Zelda franchise and a great 3DS game.
Also released Pikmin 3 in August. New Super Luigi U, like I mentioned, in August. Wind Waker, Legend of Zelda Wind Waker HD was an October release. Pokemon X and Y on the 3DS in October. And then Super Mario 3D World in November.
So I'm just going to pick it up there because that's my game, is Super Mario 3D World. A game that I have played through so many times. Did the exact same thing when it came out on the Switch. It's sort of... I've declared previously that it is among my top 5 favorite games of all time, and I'm going to stand by that. It's so fun. It's got this like perfect multiplayer chaos. But if you want to play it single player, like there's enough to explore there. There's enough meat on the bone so that the chaos can also turn into like a full single player experience. But it has such a good relationship with the Miiverse and the stamps that you collect as part of like communicating on the Miiverse. There's a stamp in every level, and they're cute. I love the stamps in Super Mario 3D World. They brought them back for the Switch version, but you're like, what do I do with this? And the answer is nothing. You don't do anything with them. Also, it introduced us to Captain Toad. We don't have Captain Toad without Super Mario 3D World. So it's like I said, one of my favorite games of all time. It's got to be my pick for 2013.
Yeah, I didn't play it. I had played it a little bit with you, but I didn't play it all the way through until it released on Switch. And yeah, Super Mario 3D World, an incredible game. It would be fun if we get another game in that like style in the future.
I would love it.
But who knows if we actually will. My pick for it for 2013 is The Legend of Zelda: Link Between Worlds for the 3DS. This was a game that I remember when it was announced, and everybody was skeptical, I would say.
Yes.
Because at first appearance, the art style, it took a little getting warming up to. Now I don't really think twice about it, but at the time the art style was kind of side-eyed a little bit.
Yeah, well, because it's trying to emulate what A Link to the Past was doing, but in a full 3D, right? Which means embracing these designs that were born out of the graphical constraints of the Super NES, but it also meant that like Link had pink hair, and like that's the only time that he has pink hair. And all of the models are like cheated a little bit so that you can see more of them. Like what they do a thing, or they did things on, like IGN and like other gaming websites where they could like drop the camera down to the side and you could see that like all the characters are leaning to the side. So you could just see more of the character models, even from an overhead perspective.
But once the game released,
Yeah.
and one more thing before I get into that part of it, is that the other thing that A Link Between Worlds did, and it's hard kind of to remember that this was the case, but people were sick of the like Zelda formula at this point.
Yes.
Skyward Sword had come out not that long ago. It had initially very good reviews, but I feel like the reputation of Skyward Sword kind of dipped for a number of years, and I think the HD revival on the Switch actually did a lot to resuscitate the reputation of that game.
Right. And also the two entries that took a break from the formula also did that.
Yeah, exactly. But people, people are sick of the Zelda formula, where, okay, you go to a dungeon and you get an item. That item helps you defeat the dungeon, and then it gets you into the next dungeon. You go through that dungeon, you get a new item, so on and so forth, where it's very linear. The formula just like repeats itself. Now, I think if we got a new game in that formula, people would be excited because it's been so long.
Right.
But that's all Zelda had been since like Ocarina of Time. And A Link Between Worlds was the first time Nintendo started to mess with that formula. You could do dungeons kind of in whatever order you wanted. There was a central store that had all the different items that you could rent or buy. And, it allowed you to kind of break the format. And people really appreciated that. Plus, the game is just a ton of fun. The dungeons are really cool. It uses the 3D and the 3DS in fun ways.
Well, because one of the main hooks is that you can turn into like a painting, and then you're just like moving along the walls, so that like you can slip through cracks in the walls. You can go on places where like there is no platform for you to be walking. It's very cool.
The story with Hyrule and Low Rule,
so rad,
amazing.
A weird pun. Like you already have the Dark World. Like what Low Rule? Okay, but Ravio and Hilda and whatever their version of Ganon is, I forget his name.
I can't remember his name.
All very cool.
Yeah, and it's fun that it's like not a remake of A Link to the Past, but like a reflection of A Link to the Past.
Yes.
I don't know. It's just, it turned out to be amazing. Link Between Worlds is a lot of fun. Talking about it makes me want to replay it.
Unfortunately, I still have your copy, and I'm never giving it up. What's interesting is, like, I was just saying that in this year, like, Luigi's Mansion Dark of the Moon is a sequel to a game 12 years later. Link Between Worlds, also out on the 3DS, is a sequel to a game that came out in, 91 is when A Link to the Past comes out? 91 or 92, something like that? 22 years earlier. Nintendo was on some, like, weird bag at this point where they're like, I don't know, let's just make direct sequels to really old games.
Oh, man. Maybe that means...
Why aren't they doing that now?
Yeah, maybe they will. Maybe someday we're going to get a, sequel to... Or I guess another sequel to Phantom Hourglass or something like that.
That'd be great. Also, I know I said that when we have Metroid Dread. Like, it's there. They're doing it. They're doing it. Okay. Would you like to move on now, Mark, to 2003?
Yeah, so at this point, Nintendo is supporting the Game Boy Advance, the Game Boy Advance SP, the physical hardware revision of the Game Boy Advance. It will be released in 2003.
Yep.
And then, they have the Game Boy Advance and the GameCube. At this point, the GameCube has been out for 2 years, and kind of like the Wii U, is not doing awesome.
Not doing awesome. Mark, I gotta say, this is not a big Nintendo year for me. Like, at the time, I'm not super plugged in to Nintendo. I'm in college at this point. And while I played a lot of games the year immediately after graduating from college, well, I stayed on campus and worked as in the professional residence life capacity. I was not really playing games that much at this time. I have written in my notes that most of what I played in 2003 are Halo, because everyone was playing Halo, so I wanted to, hang out with people. So I played a lot of Halo. Think we can all relate to that. And Enter the Matrix I played on my PlayStation 2. But that was less a part of me gaming and more a part of me having this blind Matrix fandom, which in the summer 2023 or 2003 we didn't know. We didn't know what was going to happen there.
No.
All we really had was the first Matrix movie, and then they were like, the Animatrix, Enter the Matrix, and the second Matrix movie all come out at basically the same time. And you're like, great, I'm all in.
Yeah, that's right. And those come out in 2003, I think.
Yes.
The two movies.
Yes.
Oh, man, it was Matrix Mania.
Yeah, that's right.
No, but I was playing GameCube at this point, but I didn't own it. I did not own a GBA in 2003. I would not get a Game Boy Advance until 2004. So while I did play some of the games that were released in this year, I didn't get them on release. Like, honestly, the game on this list, well, let's run down some of them. So
yeah, because there are some good or even great games.
So in 2003, you got on the GBA the Pokemon Ruby and Sapphire in March. In March, you do get The Legend of Zelda Wind Waker.
Right, on the GameCube.
Tom Clancy's Splinter Cell, the first game in the Splinter Cell series, a series that doesn't exist anymore, but for a while was huge, released in April of that year. The first WarioWare game, WarioWare Inc. Mega Microgames, came out in May. Advance Wars 2, Black Hole Rising. Didn't realize that it had a subtitle. That came out in June. Kirby Air Ride in October. Super Mario Advance 4, just now playable on Nintendo Switch Online, out in October. Harvest Moon, Friends of Mineral Town. To me, the Harvest Moon game was released in November that year. Fire Emblem, November. Mario and Luigi, Superstar Saga, shout out to Jake, came out in November. Mario Kart Double Dash came out in November. That is honestly probably the game that I played the most on this list in 2003 was Double Dash. Mario Kart game I don't really like that much.
Yeah. Same. But this is also the Wind Waker year.
Yeah. Came out in March.
Which you did say, but that's sort of the big one. And I bought it when it came out because I had a GameCube, but I just I just didn't have a lot of time to play games. And it wasn't really until after I had more time, had a Wii, and finished Twilight Princess that I was like, what else can I do with this thing? Wii plays GameCube games. I got a Zelda game I've never really played before. Played through Wind Waker at that point and loved it. But I personally can't put that as my favorite game of 2003 because, in 2003, I barely recognized it as a part of my life. You know what I mean?
Yeah, Wind Waker was the first game that I ever pre-ordered. So I remember,
wow. I think I did too.
I remember going to the mall and an EB Games or something like that, and pre-ordering it and getting the disc with the Ocarina of Time and Ocarina of Time Master Quest.
Yes,
that was the pre-order bonus.
Again, why is there no way to play the Master Quest on Switch right now?
Yeah, you're right. There isn't.
Why don't they do that?
That would be cool.
Put it on there.
They should put it on Nintendo Switch Online. But yeah, and then the game came out in March, and I remember playing some of it with my friend Thomas, and then. But similar to you, I did not beat Wind Waker until later.
Right. I mean, it's I don't know. I feel like the game is, if you don't know really what you're doing or what you're getting into, the first time you get to that city island, that's not Outset, right? Outset is where you start the game. Whenever you that first island where there are a lot of NPCs running around, that's when the game almost opens up too much and you're like, I don't know what to do next. I don't know where to go next. And when you spend more time with the game, that's liberating, right? And exciting. But when you don't know what's going on, it's just kind of now I'm lost.
Yeah, I feel like the opening of that game without knowing what comes later is weird because you totally start out on Outset Island and then the first thing you do is a stealth mission, which is not that fun.
No, it's a bad stealth mission. We talked about the Zelda openings a couple episodes back and ranked them all. And I think we love being little Link in his pajamas and his grandma and how cute that all is. That fortress part is a real bummer.
Yeah. And so again, it really is it's easy to overlook it when you're familiar with the game as a whole and you're okay, I just get through this. It's actually not that long if you know what you're doing.
Yeah.
And then I get on to the fun parts of Wind Waker. But as a first-time experience, it did not grab me, for sure.
So it sounds like neither of us are choosing Legend of Zelda Wind Waker as our game of the year for this year. Mark, let's start with you. What is your pick for game of 2003?
Prince of Persia: The Sands of Time.
Wow, we're both going off campus for this one.
Yeah, so this is an Ubisoft reinvention of Prince of Persia, and this first game is a lot of fun. The later two games in the series, I feel like they would get progressively worse, but this first one was really cool, really fun, like action platformer game that the time mechanic, like being able to like reverse time, used really smartly. Ubisoft doesn't make games like this anymore. But it was at the time kind of like a sensation. They made a Disney made a movie out of it, starring Jake Gyllenhaal.
Yeah. Oops. I've never played any of these games.
Oh wait, there was supposed to be.
There's supposed to be a remake.
There is like a remake theoretically coming. When it is released, I hope that it is a good remake. I haven't played this game for a long time, but I remember loving it, and so I hope when that remake comes out that
it's
still
any
true.
good.
Yeah.
Speaking of remakes or re-releases, more accurately, I'm actually going to submit here for my games plural of 2003 the GameCube re-releases of Resident Evil 2 and Resident Evil 3 Nemesis.
There we go.
Look at there was definitely a point where I was like, okay, I don't have like the PlayStation in my life anymore. I need to have a more durable, a more like current version of these games in my library. They re-released Resident Evil 2 and 3, and I played them again on GameCube. Again, was not playing very many games, but it was, I guess it probably was like in the summer where I was like, I'm going to play through these games again, and of course loved them because they're classics.
Were these remade in the like remake engine, or
No.
were they? Oh, so it was just Resident Evil 2.
It was just Resident Evil 2 and Resident Evil 3.
Oh, how interesting.
But like, you know, there was some you know, like extra options and stuff like that. But yeah, it was basically the exact same games that were on PlayStation you know, like 5 years before.
Huh.
But it made it so I had my complete Resident Evil collection at the time on GameCube, because you get the Resident Evil 1 remake on there, 0, and then I had 2 and 3. I don't know if they ever made Code Veronica.
They did. There was a Code Veronica for GameCube, yeah.
And obviously 4 would also came out on.
In fact,
GameCube
I think it might have.
first.
I think it might have. That's right. I think it might have been released in 2003 as well.
Well,
like,
then there you
like
go.
Code Veronica Ultra or whatever it was called.
I'm counting them all. Code Veronica X. That was the version that came out on PlayStation 2. Code Veronica X. All right, so that's 2003. I'm sorry we both had to cheat for that one.
Well, wait, how was mine a cheat? Because it wasn't a Nintendo game?
Yeah.
Oh, okay, yeah, fair.
That's it. That's it.
All right. Flag on the play.
Same way that mine's a cheat, is that it's not a Nintendo game. Mine is also 2 games, and they're both re-releases of games. Anyway, we are going now to 30 years ago, which in some ways is a very long time ago, Mark.
Mm-hmm.
First thing I want to point out, 1993, the year the John Leguizamo, Bob Hoskins Super Mario Brothers movie came out.
It's like poetry, it rhymes. 30 years later, we're getting... I think this is the real reason why they delayed the animated Super Mario Brothers movie from holiday 2002, like it was 2022, like it was originally announced for, is because they knew that the best way to honor the live-action Super Mario Brothers movie from 1993 was to release this animated one 30 years later.
What's weird to me is that looking back on the games from 1993, they feel like a long time ago, but not that long ago. Looking back on the Super Mario Brothers movie, that's a totally alien cinema landscape, 1993 to 2023. So it's bizarre to me how much longer ago that feels like. Am I making sense? Does that make sense?
No, that does make sense.
True to your experience?
Yeah. Also interesting, in 1993, Nintendo was supporting the NES, the SNES, and the Game Boy. So the Super Nintendo had been out for, you know, like it was released in 1991, and they weren't releasing a ton of new games for the NES, but like third parties were still pumping like licensed titles out. So the NES was still selling. Nintendo was making NES games. They were making cross-platform games, like Yoshi's Cookies was released on the NES, the Game Boy, and the Super Nintendo. The final NES game wouldn't be released until next until the next year in 1994.
Right.
So they're juggling three platforms now.
Kirby's Adventure on the NES comes out in 1993.
That is so crazy to me.
Isn't that
is
nuts?
so late in the NES's life.
So I find this year actually kind of difficult.
This year is a mess
because we are not early enough in the Super NES's life cycle where we are getting like all the great bangers that like it launched with, right? And all of like the first 2 years of the Super NES, which are phenomenal. And we're not late enough that we're getting those like late era masterpieces like Final Fantasy III, like Chrono Trigger, Mario RPG, all the Donkey Kong Country games. We're just not deep enough into that console's life cycle yet for any of those bangers. And I feel like we're in the same position with Game Boy, right? That we're not part of like the initial like rush to greatness with Game Boy games, and we are obviously pre Pokemon, but we're pre even Donkey Kong 94, right? So like the pickings actually feel pretty slim here.
Yeah, I mean there are still some notable releases, but to your point, it's been interesting. We didn't intend this when we kind of like set this topic, but it feels like potentially 2023 for Nintendo is going to be like a lot of these years where there are going to be notable releases. I mean, obviously Tears of the Kingdom is coming out.
Right.
But kind of like an off year.
Right. I mean, mind you, we're in uncharted territory now.
Yes.
So who knows?
Uh-huh.
But I hear what you're saying, and I think that's right. There's also like there's just like a trend that I noticed, and maybe it's just in these two games because I didn't obviously comb through the entire library. But we start to see Street Fighter 2 clones like popping up on the Super NES at this point. I think it maybe doesn't come out until 94, but Mortal Kombat 2 is big in the arcades in 1993. But Clay Fighter and Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Tournament Fighter both come out on Super NES in 1993. Bad Street Fighter likes, like chasing a trend and not being able to keep up with it, which is sort of what the whole year feels like to me.
I mean, there are some notable new releases.
Sure.
In March of 1993, Star Fox was released, so that's a big one. You get, like you mentioned, Kirby's Adventure on the NES, Link's Awakening on the Game Boy comes out in August. You get Super Mario All-Stars also in August. Zombie Ate My Neighbors in September. Super Star Wars The Empire Strikes Back. Wrote that down as notable.
That's a good one. Thank you for I missed that.
Aladdin comes out in November. Clay Fighter comes out in November. Jurassic Park also released in November of that year.
Love Jurassic Park.
So you know
Super NES.
So but for Nintendo specifically, it's definitely a light year.
Right. Which is probably why Super Mario All-Stars came out, right? Like a reason to be like, hey, here are 3 of our greatest games we ever made on the NES. Now you can play them with new graphics and all in one package and blah, blah, blah. Like, that is the Metroid Prime remaster of 1993.
Absolutely. And it is my pick for favorite game in 1993. We were recently on an episode of Super NPCs where we talked about our top 9 Super Nintendo games. It was me, Patrick, friend of the show, Connor McCabe, and Jeremy Schmidt. And
friends of the show. They're both friends of the show.
Yes, that's right.
Right.
Yeah. And so one of my picks was Super Mario All-Stars. For me, these are the versions of Super Mario Brothers, Super Mario Brothers 2, and Super Mario Brothers 3 that I have like the most memory of, the ones with the updated Mario sprite and all the background, graphics and colors that are missing from the NES version. I was young enough with the NES that like I did a lot of observing of my parents and like siblings play it, but I didn't play it that much myself. And so I realized like most of my memories of actually playing those games come from the All-Stars version. And so I really love Super Mario All-Stars.
But your memories of the Lost Levels, that's on the original Famicom, right?
That's right. Yes.
That's a great pick. It's a smart pick. Also, just to keep shouting out Super NPC shows, I was on their Wii draft just this last week, and I was tempted to, but did not actually end up picking the release of Super Mario All-Stars on Wii, because then you're getting those games, right? And it's the ROM dumped onto a disc. So I was tempted to go with Star Fox for my pull here, because it is a great game, amazing arcadey action. I love when those little voices are talking to ba 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 ba. It's so cool. But instead I went with The Secret of Mana, which is a game that I just barely shouted out on our 9 favorite Super NES games episode with Connor and Jeremy. But is such a good game that I felt bad for not shouting it out harder. So I'm doing it here. It's a sequel to, in Japan, it was Seiken Densetsu. The first game came out on the Game Boy, both here and in Japan. Here as Final Fantasy Final Fantasy Adventure. In Japan as Seiken Densetsu. And it's just a action RPG with sort of a Zelda perspective, where you charge up your attacks through 8 bars of charging up eventually. And there's spells based on these creatures that you summon. It's multiplayer, so you can get up to 3 people running around a map at a time. There's a boy, a girl, and a weird little sprite thing that all have their own magic, their own abilities. And it's a super fun, sort of straightforward story-wise, right? Feels like a Square RPG of the era, because it is. But it makes fun use of Mode 7, and you're flying a dragon around at one point that looks like the dragon from the Neverending Story. You can get shot out of a cannon to traverse the world. It's just a cool game.
And the music's great.
And the music rips. Yeah, absolutely. But what a weird year for Nintendo.
Yeah, Link's Awakening is on here. Nothing to sniff at.
Sure.
But yeah, just kind of more of a mixed bag.
Mark, because we are so far in time right now, because we're in 2023, we could conceivably do 40 years ago. I know we haven't prepped for this.
Yeah, 83.
Let me tell you a couple things that happened in 1983.
Okay.
If I may.
Yeah.
So Mario Brothers.
Okay.
The original, not Super Mario Brothers, but Mario Brothers.
The arcade game.
The arcade game comes out in 1983, which means this is the first appearance of Luigi.
Okay.
Okay.
So it's the original Year of Luigi.
Yes, that's right. Which is why, of course, one of the other ones would also be another year of Luigi.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Right?
This is all making sense.
It all comes together. 1983, of course, the release of Donkey Kong 3, which means it is also the first appearance of Stanley the Bugman. But 1983
is I'm sorry to interrupt, but
no,
you know how there's slang for supporting someone and saying we stan? That must come from Stanley the Bugman, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay,
yeah.
Great.
Well, because only real fans know who Stanley the Bugman is. That's why we say we stan them, right?
Yep.
1983 is, of course, the year that the Famicom is released in Japan.
Interesting.
So if I have to pick one of those...
It's Donkey Kong 3.
It's Donkey Kong 3.
Yeah.
First appearance of Stanley.
I know. Yeah. Famicom. Okay. Whatever. What kind of a legacy does that leave? But Stanley the Bugman?
Look, he would go on to star in Donkey Kong 3 again on the Game & Watch. And then Greenhouse, maybe the best Game & Watch game there is.
It's a tough battle.
He's totally erased from those games in the Game & Watch gallery.
It's a real shame.
It's a crime against Stanley. All right, Mark, we've done our...
Stanmanity? It's a crime against
Stanmanity? Bugmanity.
There we
go. It's
a
crime against Bugmanity. All right, Mark, let's close this out. Crime against Bugmanity. All right, that's going to do it for this episode of Nintendo Cartridge Society. Did we leave out your favorite games from 5, 10, 20, 30, or even now 40 years ago? If so, you should write into us at Nintendo Cartridge Society at gmail.com. Thank you to our 16-bit patron, Connor McCabe. Thank you, Connor. You can follow us on Twitter. I'm at Patrick_Ellers. Mark is at MK Mitchell, and the show is at NinCart Society. You can also join our Discord. Just email or tweet at us for an invitation, and we will let you in. Anthony DeLuca made our logo. Our theme music is provided by 8-Bit Betty. You can get more of his music by going to 8bitbetty.com or by listening right now. For my co-host, Mark Mitchell, this is Patrick Ellers saying, do you think we needed to explain that the music at the beginning of the episode was the music that plays when Mike travels through time in Star Tropics 2? Does it matter? No one's going to get it. Thank you for listening.